In the last episode, we had just finished setting up our first two science pack production mini factories and started the steel research. Now, because I had been slacking on the defensive side, I found myself having to deal with very punishing biter attacks. So to remedy this, I began setting up a brick production line. Brick is made by smelting stone into a furnace, so by applying what we've seen before with the mining and smelting, we can easily and quickly set up a small brick factory. You can place down a brick pathways by simply taking the bricks out of your inventory and placing them on the ground. You will see a green box appear around your cursor when equipping the bricks. You can then increase the placement size using plus and minus on your number pad, and when walking on a brick path you'll gain a 130% bonus speed. This is very useful early game if you have a more spread out base like I do. With the remaining brick I set up a small wall factory. The wall blocks have a lot of health points and can be used as additional defenses for your turrets. As you can see, it was a real struggle to get in front of the biter attacks. One thing you should do as soon as you have the firepower to do so is to go clear out any biter bases that are within the pollution cloud. This will give you a lot more breathing room to build your factory in peace. Since we are playing in normal mode, the biters will constantly build new bases and creep up towards me. This option can be turned off in the world creation settings by turning off the enemy expansion option. Also, don't forget to constantly keep an eye on your power production as you're expanding your base. You don't want to be running out of power, especially at this point in the game with all the attacks happening around you. Now at this point I decided to start producing steel. Steel is used in a lot of recipe and is quite simple to make. All you have to do is smelt iron plates. There are a lot of steel smelters design out there, but I like to just use the same furnace array twice laid back to back. Steel takes 16 seconds to produce and requires 5 iron plates. Since it takes 3.2 seconds to make one iron plate, you can math out the ratio by multiplying 5 times 3.2 seconds, which equals 16, and you will notice that this again is a perfect ratio. You will also see me struggling with power poles as I'm finding it hard to find the wood necessary to craft them. Steel will help a lot in this regard as it will open up the doors to medium and big power poles as well as some better ammunition. Here, I'm doubling the belt line going into my furnaces to increase the iron throughput going into my base. Although the belt was fully compressed with ore, I wasn't feeding enough ore into my smelting array to supply all my furnaces. Now I was talking about the better ammunition earlier, and here it is. You can unlock it with the military tool research and it will give you access to a piercing round magazine that you can craft using steel and copper, as well as the normal yellow mags. It also gives you access to grenades that you can craft from coal and iron, and we'll be making those soon enough as these are also required for the military science packs. You will notice a big damage difference using these red mags, especially early in the game. You see me save quite often at this stage. That is because I died a lot trying to defend my base. Even though the early game biters are not very tough, they tend to overwhelm you with numbers. As you unlock more military research and progress through the game, the biters will also evolve and get bigger and more dangerous, but they won't come in quite such big numbers as they do early game. At some point, I decided to go for a more aggressive approach and went for the closest biter base. Even with the upgraded ammunition, it was a bit challenging as I took a lot of damage. You'll notice that I'm researching the heavy armor at the same time. This gives you a better armor, but it requires steel to craft. And after that, it's just me running around my base, upgrading my defenses, reloading my turrets, and then here you see me adding the new power poles to the make everything. Okay then, so what I'd like to do now is clear all the databases that are within the pollution cloud, but they are kind of far away. So what I'm going to do first is unlock the car, but we have to unlock the engines and logistics to research first. So let's get going on that. And it would be also nice to get that physical projectile damage research done as well. Now whilst the research is going, I'm going to focus on reloading all the turrets and adding more walls to my base. Also, we now have access to lamps, which will light up the place during nighttime. So let's add those to the make everything as well. And of course, just after I said I was going to wait to get the car to go kill the buyers, I decided to go there on foot anyway, because it was just going to take too long to wait for it to happen. So I took some ammunition and I just went for the buyers. Now if there's a tip I can give you is to focus on the big worms first, because they can shoot you from a distance and you take quite a significant amount of damage from them. So focus on the big worms first, and then the biters, and then the bases. Now here's also a tip for you. If you didn't know, you can fish up some fish from the water lakes. You will see them as black spots on the water. Just right click on them to pick them up, and you can eat them to regain some instant health during a fight. And we're back. Now I thought I had recorded this, but I guess I didn't. So I've unlocked the car with the research, and here's how I've set up my make everything. The car requires engines to build, and the engine require pipes. So I've set up the pipes over here, and I've chained my assembling machines here like so to feed everything inside the next machine so that it can produce my car. Now note here that the engines cannot be crafted from your inventory. You do have to build them inside an assembling machine. Now the car is very useful. Where is it? There it is. You can place it down on the ground. It does require a fuel source to power, so let's give it some coal. It has an inventory, so you can put anything you want inside. This can be useful for building outposts, and it also has an ammunition slot, which you can give it some ammunition to power the turret on top. You can drive it using WASD, although you have to be careful because it does collide with the environment and it's going to take some damage, and you can also damage your base. What I usually like to do is bind it on my quick access bar and also always have one on me and some coal to power it. It is very useful to drive around your base or the world and get quick access to distant areas. Okay, now the next addition we'll be adding to the base is a military science branch. I've unlocked the research and I'd like to go over the details with you to discuss how you should go about building a branch without having to rely on blueprints found on the internet. Although they can be very useful in certain situations, I find it more enjoyable to just try to build something myself first, watch it run and fix it later. I find that you can learn a lot more about the game if you do it that way rather than just copy paste someone else's design. So let's start off with an assembly machine. I'm going to leave some space here for my design, and this will be making the military science pack. Now notice that this time doing one craft will give you 2 science packs instead of just one pack with the others. One crafting also takes 10 seconds of crafting time. So again, if we want to respect the one pack per second ratio, we are going to want to have 5 assembling machines like so. By the way, you can copy a recipe from an assembly machine by pressing Shift right click and Shift left click to paste. Now let's go over the recipe again. We are going to need piercing rounds, grenades and walls. So let's begin with the piercing rounds. We need 1 a second. So let's leave some space here. This should be enough. And we'll set this to produce piercing rounds. And looking at the recipe, you'll see that these take 3 seconds to craft. So if we want to have 1 every second, we need 3 assembling machines. And let's go over the recipe again. And we also need 1 firearm magazine per second. So let's add it here on top. And the firearm magazine take 1 second to craft, so 1 assembling machine is enough. Let's add some more space, and I think building it here should be fine. We also need grenades, so 1 grenade per second. Let's set the recipe in this machine. And going over this grenade recipe, this one is a bit more tricky because you'll see that you need quite a lot of components. You need 10 coal per second to craft 1 grenade a second, and 10 coal is quite a lot. If you look at a transport belt, belt can transport 15 items per second. Now if we were to have the coal and the iron on the same belt like we do over here, then we'll only have half a belt, which would be about 7.5 items a second, and that wouldn't be enough to supply this assembling machine because we need 10 a second. So I'm gonna have 1 dedicated line just for coal and 1 just for the iron. And since we need since these take 8 seconds to craft, we are going to have 8 assembling machines. We'll take the coal out of this belt, the iron out of this belt, and we'll output on this line. Here we need an iron belt input, which will be coming from here. We need 4 seconds, so let's do something like that. We need a copper and a steel line. And because we can, we will also output on this line. Okay, and we will just pipe it on the ground, do some magic here, I don't know, something like that, to bring it over to these assembling machines. And now let's go over the military science packs again, and we also need 2 volts per second. So let's leave some space here again. And now the walls take half a second to craft, so if you only have one machine, you'll be crafting 2 volts a second. Now looking at the ingredients again, we need to have stone brick, we need coal, and yeah, that's about it. So we have to bring in coal and bricks here on our main bus. We are already producing the brick over here, so I'm going to connect this up and bring it into here on the main bus. And for the coal, we could take this belt, put it on the bus, but we also have a coal patch over here, so I'm going to dedicate this coal patch to the production of the military science pack. Now we actually do need a lot of coal for the grenades, so taking just this whole patch is not actually a bad idea. And here I'm using the big power poles instead of the small ones. As you can see, they have a longer reach distance, but their area of effect is much smaller, so these are quite useful for traversing large distances. Now here's a cool trick for you guys. If you look closely at this belt line over here, you'll see that since we are not picking up the items evenly from the belt, it creates some sort of backlog and only half our miners are running on this belt, and it makes it so the belt is not completely compressed. So I'm using a splitter here and placing the belts in this particular way so that you are balancing both halves of the belts, and now you'll see that my miners behind the belts are all working at the same time. And voila, that is the military science done. Now, two things worth noting here is that I've researched the fast inserters. They come with the the fast inserter research. Those are essentially the same as the yellow ones, but they work at a faster speed. Now you want to be careful with those, because if you have a look here at the electricity consumption, they consume 500 watts, whereas these 400 watts. So it's a small increase, but it can add up if you place them down everywhere. So I tend to only use them when strictly necessary. Like here, for example, we were not outputting the bricks, the walls fast enough on the belt. And the fast inserter research gave us also access to the filter inserters, which I'm using here, for example, to only place grenades in the box. So these will only work when you set up your whitelist in this case. So I'm only allowing it to pick up from this list of items, and at the moment we only have grenades inside the list, so it's only going to pick up the grenades from this belt to place them in the box. And grenades are useful to deal with the biters, so I like to have the excess be put in a box. Alright guys, and that is it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed watching the video, and I'll see you soon in the next episode.